Welcome to the Long Take Review, where four college professors talk film, providing insight, not assigning homework. I'm your host, Jen Supchak-Bankard, and I'm here with some black smoke and some white smoke. You'll have to decide which is which. First, we'd like to put out his full podcasting schedule to show how hard he was working until the end. It's Greg Cass. How's it going, Greg?
You were the chosen one, Bellini. It was said you would destroy Tedesco, not join him. Bring balance to the force, not leave it in dark. Oh, Jen, I have my old notes up. I'm so sorry. I'm an episode back. I'm good, Jen. How are you?
I'm doing great. This is what happens when you record too many days in 1 week, folks. It's casualty of the schedule. And he may need a minute to take a puff from his vape pen. It's PT McDiff. How's it going, PT?
Is this what we're reduced to, considering the least worst option? I'm doing well, Jen. How are you?
Feeling a lot more cynical now. Okay. And who's on the guest list today? He's available to take care of your Vatican turtles. It's Karl LaClair of the Wampa's Lair podcast. How are you doing, Karl?
Well, I'm not funny enough or punny enough for these fellas, but I'm just here as Karl. And I said to them when I logged in, I was like, y'all got fun names here in the feed for Zencastr, and I'm Karl. So
that's right. Karl, you are Karl enough. Right? All right. So welcome to the very first edition of the LTR Guest List. This is a special episode series that we are starting in which we ask our friends to pick a movie, any movie, that they will, with our pending our approval, that they want to discuss with us. PT like that I added that. Well, I just don't want to create any loopholes, you know. Get us in trouble talking about movies we don't want to talk about. Karl is a great friend of ours. He actually is a mutual friend through Greg. They met, I believe, waiting in line for action figures, right, Greg?
Yeah, where else do you meet people? What, you guys like go to bars or something?
Yeah.
Was that for Francis or for Benedict?
Yeah, Toys R Us closing was a huge hit to my social life. Like, it was hard.
So Karl is not only a Star Wars fan and our friend, but he is also the chaplain and coordinator of Christian life at Brandeis University. And that will become relevant as soon as we introduce what movie we're talking about. So it's teased for later. Karl, we're so happy to have you on the guest list. We're going to start with the guest list pop quiz because we had to keep it a little academic, which is a series of getting to know you questions for our listeners. Are you ready?
Oh, yes, indeed.
Awesome. So first up, Karl, what is your favorite film of all time? I would probably have a pretty good guess, but
your guess would probably be right, Jen. It is The Empire Strikes Back. I mean, it is a perfect film, and my entry to Star Wars, and knowing all of you by extension, right? So I gotta love it.
Yeah, Star Wars makes friends.
It does, and Toys R Us.
That's true. That's true. Oh, R.I.P. Toys R Us. All right, next is, who is your favorite actor or actress? Like, we're using actor as the umbrella term for all performers. Favorite of all time.
So I told Greg and PT earlier that I got really nervous when I saw that question because I was like, oh, that's right. Y'all actually watch lots of films and can really have a good assessment of this. But I do have my answer, and it is Saoirse Ronan, because when I watch her in films, I just watch somebody become so incredibly human that I always feel something. And for me, I think that's the best kind of an actor, is somebody that elicits feeling. And no one has profoundly moved me the way that Saoirse has in the movies I've seen her in. And I've not seen all of them, but all of the ones I have, I'm just like, oh gosh, like, she just knows how to pull heartstrings. And I think compared to other actors, can really escape into roles and doesn't feel in any way like she's ever been in a box. And anytime that might even feel like a threat for her, it's like, I'm going to do something different then. So yeah. So I'm going to go with a great choice. Good old Saoirse.
Yes, we're very pro Saoirse Ronan on this podcast.
I knew you would be. So I was
like, yes.
I told them earlier, I was like, I kind of want to say Rob Pattinson because of the Batman, but like, other than
we're also
Batman,
pro.
Like, so
that would have been also a perfectly acceptable answer. So, all right, amazing. Have you seen? You haven't said you haven't seen all of her movies. Have you seen Little Women at least?
Of course, I love that movie. But I will say, I think my favorite still of hers is Lady Bird. It's
Lady Bird, yes.
It's so good. It's so good.
Agreed. All right. What is a film that you think is underrated?
The Batman. I mean, I know overall it's pretty well rated, but I think it needs to be more well rated. So I would agree. So good. And understandably, I know it gets lots of flack. All my friends give me plenty because it's a day-long movie, but I'm ready for it every time. I set aside a day and I watch The Batman.
Amazing. Yeah, we're not afraid of long run times on the show. I know. So you're talking to the right crowd for sure. I would say that like in superhero movie discourse, people just seem to have forgotten about this movie, and that seems unfair.
Agreed.
Yeah. So that's good.
It deserves to be separated from all of the turmoil at DC and all the craziness going over there. And I think that's part of its problem is people are like, I don't care about anything they're doing over there.
Yeah.
Didn't they do Shazam? Where nobody picked Superman again?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a glaring omission in our hype draft for sure. All right, what is a film that you think is overrated?
The Godfather. It's incredibly overrated.
He just logged off.
Yes, he's gone.
I knew this was going to be risky, but it's a movie that I know so many people love. And when I finally watched it as prep for the Batman's runtime, I was like, wow, this movie is so slow and nothing happens until the very end. That's my very amateur take. But yeah, I have pissed off so many people in my life by saying I don't like The Godfather.
I think that's a fair take. I also think anytime you go and watch something that you've been told is one of the best things of all time, it's like, all right, prove it. And then, it's hard to go past the hype. So I think even as someone who does quite like The Godfather, I'm not against thinking that it is overhyped. Certainly. I don't know about overrated, but it's overhyped.
That's fair. Yeah. Cause I understand objectively probably what it meant for 1970s or earlier than the 70s.
72, yeah.
72, yeah. So, yeah. So, nobody's going to take me seriously the rest of the show. So, like, is there really any point?
No, we appreciate that you're owning your takes. This is great. Yeah, you should these questions are designed for you to be who you are. And we love it. All right. So, last question. If you could pick one genre of film to watch for the rest of your life, what would it be?
So, this is kind of a cop-out because it's not a genre. But it should be at this point, and that would be Star Wars.
Oh.
I mean, you're preaching to the choir here.
It's the only movies that I watch all the time, right? Mm-hmm. And there's no other genre that it's like, oh yeah, I've got to have a good action, or I got to have good sci-fi, or I need a good drama. I just need Star Wars. So I know it's not a genre, so I'm kind of copying out there.
Sorry, I feel like you could say space fantasy because I was trying to think if there was anything else I'd put into the space fantasy versus sci-fi camp. Does anybody have an answer to that?
I mean, Doctor Who is probably the other big franchise that falls into because it's timey-wimey, but not hard sci-fi.
Yeah,
it can depend on the episode.
Right? I'm sure there are like, especially knockoffs of Star Wars, like wannabe Star Wars from like the late 70s and early 80s. But yeah, I say space fantasy, or even just say sci-fi. And then you can get all of your Star Wars. And if you ever feel like I need Wrath of Khan, you can go and do that. So you create a loophole for yourself.
So
I need a Blade Runner.
Wikipedia is not helpful for this. I just need some examples. Oh, Star Trek, Star Wars. That might be it. And this is science fantasy because space fantasy didn't yield any. That's so weird.
It's also hinting at like Lovecraftian horror because that's fantastical and therefore not science fiction. And also planetary romance and steampunk because it isn't really like rooted in the advancement of science so much as an alternate reality where different technology exists. So yeah, space fantasy.
I like it. All right. Well, we can also make Star Wars its own genre.
Why not?
That's I don't know if anyone's going to argue with it. If you're listening to this and you're like, this is trash. Why are you saying this? Tell us. Explain why. All right. So the film we are here to talk about today, very much not space fantasy, I would say. But Karl, you asked us to come back from our Oscar coverage to talk about Edward Berger's Conclave, which I don't know if your timing could have been any better, honestly. Like,
I can see things before they happen.
Yeah. So for those who are listening, Conclave is a thriller about the election of a new pope, and Pope Francis sadly has died recently, April 21st. And this is breaking news, and I'm actually not even sure if I have all of the news because I've been pretty busy today. I haven't been looking at the news a lot. But as of this recording, there was white smoke sighted emanating from the Vatican, and a new pope has been elected. It's a lot shorter turnaround than in Conclave. Conclave, it took like a week. and this took 2 days.
Conclave is a lot longer than they've been traditionally in recent history, too. So
okay. Yeah, I looked it up. Apparently, the longest in actual history is 5 days.
Yeah.
As opposed to a week. So it's not too far off. All right. So to give a little primer, in Berger's film, Ralph Fiennes stars as Cardinal Lawrence, the dean of the cardinals, who must lead his ambitious and politically divided colleagues through an election following the sudden death of a pope. With each round of voting, Lawrence uncovers new secrets and scandals. The stellar cast includes Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, Isabella Rossellini, Carlos Diaz, Lucian Masamati, and Sergio Castellitto. Insert vape pen. This film was a major Oscar contender this past year. It received 8 nominations, but ultimately took home only 1 statue for Best Adapted Screenplay. If you are listening now and you're like, where can I watch this? I missed this when it came out in theaters. It is streaming on, I believe, Peacock, and recently got added to Amazon Prime Video, which is where I was rewatching it earlier today. Unlike our regular reviews, just so you know, we're going to start in spoiler mode from the beginning so that our guests can feel as unencumbered as possible. And also, like, for a lot of these episodes, we're probably going to be talking about older films where spoilers are sort of less time sensitive, although people still get mad about things that are really old being spoiled. So if you have not yet seen Conclave and you don't want it spoiled, hit pause and return to us once you have seen it. All right, PT, our last order of business before we get going. If listeners want to cast their vote for us after listening to this episode, what can they do?
Well, if they are supposed to be invisible, but God has nevertheless given them eyes and ears, they can follow the Long Take Review wherever they get their podcasts. We host the feed on Jen's Substack at thelongtake.substack.com, but you can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, YouTube, and many more. Wherever you're listening right now, you can follow us there. You can also follow us on social media. We are on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at The Long Take Review. And we are also on Letterboxd. The account is at LTR Pod, or you can search for the hashtag LTR Pod to see what each of us individually have been watching. Jen?
Thanks, PT. So, as always, we'll start with our short take, and guest has first crack. So, Karl, tell us a little bit about why you wanted to come on and talk about this film.
Jen, I wish I'd understand. First off, thank you for letting me be the first one on your new segment. That's really cool. So thank you. I also wish I had known this was about to be a new segment because I 100% would have picked the Batman. Just
you can come back. It's fine.
Talking to
it's not a one-time thing.
All right, cool. No, I mean, with Francis's death a couple of weeks ago, it was like, oh, this movie is going to become extra popular again. And as you alluded to in my job description, right, I'm a Christian chaplain at Brandeis. I grew up in the Catholic tradition for most of my life. I'm no longer Catholic. I'm Episcopalian. So it's just like Catholic light without the messiness. I really wanted to talk about the film because I think it actually has, to me, a lot to say about kind of modern theology. What is the role of church? What is the role of, even more broadly speaking, organized religion? And what is going on right now in religious institutions that is both good and bad. To keep it as short as possible for the short take is I knew this movie was about to become really relevant. And I think it has a lot to say about what's going on in our world right now because it's a modern story. This is the short take. I'm done. Period.
Okay. Yeah. We'll get into it more.
You're not the only one who has problems keeping it to short in the short take. But I did rewatch this for the first time since seeing it in theaters last fall for this episode, and it's such an interesting concept of this thriller, really a political thriller and sort of this machinations story, but set in this in this unique world, the world of the cardinals, the space of the Vatican, and with this element lurking over it of this is supposed to be a divine interaction of God coming through to sort of help pick his guy. That's not the right way of saying it. But he's coming to pick his. It's supposed to be through the power of God, but it's so earthbound, and it's so person versus person and faction versus faction, and our main character seems to be that reflects the struggle that he keeps saying he's had, because we're not doing spoilers, that he's been struggling with his faith and with the church, and so I think that's what I took this time. The last time I watched it was like 2 or 3 weeks before the election in November, and I felt different then about the results of what happened than I do now, but that's not the movie's fault. Greg, what do you think?
So this was my third time watching this movie. So I had seen it. I think I bragged about, I got like an early advance screening. Oh yeah, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. Just still talking about it 6 months later. So I saw it early, and then I had watched it one time when it hit Peacock, because my wife hadn't seen it and was curious about it. Had heard it was good. And I had also read the book. So it's funny because I think everybody's second viewing, where they know all the twists are going to come, is like a key one. Like, you really want to see it a second time for that reason. That was kind of my first version of this, because I knew, it's a very faithful adaptation. So I kind of knew the twists that were coming. But I really liked what PT just said there. And I was reveling this time kind of in this weird gap, right? Like, They use the Vatican as the frame for this, and we see all the ritual, and that's like so fascinating. I am not Catholic. I grew up in a Congregationalist church and don't attend regularly anymore. But like, I don't understand all that side of the Catholic Church, and yet, like, I think most people, it's like endlessly fascinating. And then you get John Lithgow in his like super cool cassock, and he's like, do you want an espresso? I'm going to make a coffee. And that gap of like, here are these cool rituals, these divine representatives of this faith and this hugely interesting thing, but they're also just like guys, and they got and mostly guys, and they got to go make a coffee, or they got to hit their vape pen. And I think the film has a lot of fun with that. And I would also point to the weird Cardinal hotel they're all staying in, that like is nice and beautiful, but also like kind of tacky. And we all were just at a conference together. It's like, yeah, it looks like a fairly nice Hilton that they're staying at as a part of it. So I really enjoyed that this time around. It seems true to me, and this will be my last short take thought, that the more people focus on the final twist, the less successful this film seems to people, right? I think you have to look at the whole story being told and not think of it as a like Sixth Sense type ending. Not to spoil that one, because we didn't warn about that. Jen, how do you feel about all of organized religion, but more specifically, Conclave the movie?
This is why we should have Greg go first next time. So I feel like you're always the one setting me up, and you try to do that by way of undermining what I'm going to say. So this time around, like PT, this was the first time I rewatched this since I had seen it in theaters when it originally came out. And first of all, holds up to a rewatch. I had a great time. And I think to pick up on something that Karl had just said, for me, the thing that I really noticed that maybe I didn't clock as much the first time because I was so fixated on the suspense and the twists and the turns and the plot. But the style of filmmaking here, even though the story is based on a fictional novel, is so incredibly documentary driven, because they're all those sort of like portrait type shots of just not even characters from the story, but just like random cardinals or random nuns, or, you know what I mean? Like, and very much kind of like a documentary film style. or even more, maybe less documentary film style, more documentary photography style. Because I said portrait, right? And there's also the shots of the artwork in the Sistine Chapel and kind of like the religious connotations of that in terms of what a character might be thinking or feeling. Usually Ralph Fiennes being conflicted about something, right? So a lot of this sort of like camera work I was kind of more attuned to this time around because I knew what the events were going to be, so I wasn't as like much thinking about that. So that's the thing I really appreciated that maybe I wouldn't have picked up on as much the first go around.
Can I ask you all a quick random trivia question around this movie? Do you all know the connection between Conclave and Star Wars via John Lithgow?
Ooh.
I mean, I know that the part of it is filmed in the same place where they filmed the Theed Palace of Naboo. I don't know if that's not John Lithgow.
Involves John Lithgow.
Yeah.
Who does John Lithgow play in Star Wars? PT?
Does he have the same espresso machine that Rian Johnson had on The Last Jedi?
I know the answer, which is that John Lithgow plays Yoda in the Return of the Jedi and
Right.
Empire Strikes Back radio dramas, which if you have not heard his Yoda, it's incredible.
I have not heard that, but I can totally see it or hear it.
I love thinking about Buckaroo Banzai era John Lithgow recording Yoda. That sounds hopefully with the same.
Yeah, that sounds fun. I love it. All right. So now I want to move on to the long take. We're going to really dig deep into this film. And I want to start with a question that's mostly for Karl. Obviously, at the top of the show, I mentioned that this episode that we're recording is extremely timely because of current events in the real world. And, I'm always constantly telling my students that they have to establish a sense of exigency in what they're talking about. And so this is a perfect opportunity to do that. It's like very low hanging fruit. So I want to just kind of like ask Karl about how he feels the Catholic Church is represented in this. Like, is it accurate? And do you feel like people are going to think of this as I said earlier, kind of more of like a documentary about a papal election as opposed to a dime store novel style thriller?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, Jen. And, as I shared earlier, I'm no longer a practicing Catholic, but so much of my life was in that tradition. That's where my master's degree comes from, Boston College, which is a Jesuit Catholic space.
Go Eagles.
And of course, I want to first acknowledge just the fact that however I answer this, other Catholics would probably disagree. And what I want to kind of give
we watched the movie, Karl. We know.
But so there are definitely some Catholic voices that feel like it was incredibly disrespectful to the Catholic Church, but they're all the wrong voices. These are the guys that make space for Ben Shapiro and folks like that and get offended by anything that is not conservative. I think it does an incredibly faithful job to representing how the Catholic Church works. Your comment, Jen, about kind of this documentary, almost photography, specifically on that first day as they're gathering at the apartments. And those apartments, if you didn't know, that is actually meant to look exactly like the papal apartments for the cardinals. And Pope Francis actually lived there full time. When he became Pope, he was like, that's where I'm setting up shop. And also, interestingly enough, dead Pope, as he's listed in the credits, is made up to look like Francis. His dress is made to look like Francis. It's clear that his policies are meant to elicit a sense of Francis. And Robert Harris, when he wrote the novel, wrote it shortly after being in Rome when Francis was elected and was inspired to write a story about how that process could look. And so to that comment, sorry that I got sidetracked on, I love those kind of photography shots of all these different faces of cardinals, because to me, what that represents is something that Ralph Fiennes' character talks about in his homily, which is that the Catholic Church is very universal. And I thought that those quick shots very much are presenting the fact that this is what the Catholic Church looks like. It's a worldwide institution with so many shades and colors within it. And I thought that was so beautiful, and it really represents that kind of universality of this tradition. So really liked that. And I also really loved all the ritual stuff. I loved being an altar server when I was a kid. And still, whenever I get like an opportunity at a religious ceremony, like, can you help out with this? I'm always like, hell yes. Love all that. So Now, do they actually strike the ring like that when the Pope dies? I honestly don't know. But I think it's very faithful to the fact that the Catholic Church is a very old traditional institution. And I think being faithful to showcasing these kind of beautiful rituals, to me, represents what makes the Catholic tradition quite beautiful, is the fact that it has this richness of ritual. I think that's what makes all religions actually quite captivating, is the fact that they have such rich traditions and rituals that make them such cultural icons. So I think it does a really good job in the politics aspect. It's very much living with what the modern church looks like. I think all the cardinals they pick to kind of be the four contenders at the start of the film is trying to represent in a very honest way what are probably some of the current debates going on in this universal church. So yeah, I think it's really faithful to it. I think everything it does is genuinely just trying to present like, yeah, this is what it looks like. And isn't it kind of neat? This is like how I kind of read it. And I don't think it's in any way trying to be preachy or trying to say like, hey, look, you should become a Catholic. I think it's just presenting it and shooting it in such a way that it looks so beautiful, because to me, it's very respectful of that tradition. In a world that is increasingly disrespectful to religious tradition, especially Christian traditions. I think it does a very good job of trying to be an honest representation of what that looks like. And all of the priest friends I've had throughout my life have always talked about when they go to the Vatican, it is incredibly clerical there. So these guys running around in cassocks, like that's what you wear in the Vatican. Even if you're like a really, really progressive American priest and you're like, ugh, cassocks are so gross, you still wear one when you're in the Vatican. Like it's just what you do when you are in the Vatican. So, so I think even that aspect, even that little itty bitty grittiness, is really neat.
Just to build on, shout out, inspired by what you were talking about, shout out to the sound work in that opening scene where they're sealing the room, like from the ring popping open to the tape going over the door. I just feel like, yeah, it's the way that they shot that and did the sound work on that is amazing.
And I think an interesting thing that you said, Karl, and I don't know if I need to burnish any bona fides here. I mean, I grew up Catholic. I went to a Catholic high school. I'm confirmed.
Excuse me. Oh, geez. All right.
Look, I'm not saying I'm getting in. I'm just saying I'm getting closer to the gates than y'all are. I think that it does tap into that sort of theatricality and the ornateness of the traditions, that are sort of on the ground, so to speak, in a sort of weekly mass, even daily mass context and setting, but obviously at this huge and more momentous level at the Vatican, with all these cardinals selecting a pope and doing this very sort of sacred ritual. But I also think it's interesting that they, the clear sort of villain within the cardinals, Tedesco, the conservative, I don't think the movie is shying away from like, this guy's the bad guy. Like, if you are watching this movie and you agree with him, like, you're supposed to be rethinking what your perspectives are. But he is the one who's so rooted in, like, we need to honor our traditions. We need to be looking back at these things. How quick and easy it is to move from, look at all this tradition, look at all this sort of these rituals, how great that is, how quickly that can be like subsumed into the argument for we got to go backwards instead of going forwards. And how difficult it is, but also important it is for the people arguing of like, no, we can still go forward and we can move forward with all of these and try to actually improve things, which I think the ending of the movie does speak to, of like a radically different outcome than anyone expected, of like, okay, like we've really changed it up. We're not going back. That's interesting. I think that is sort of bubbling underneath, and is in a way that it sort of, that doesn't subvert, but I think is intertwined with that, the seduction of how awesome it all looks, because all these traditions look so cool and so interesting and intriguing, and you want to catch all these details and you want to just believe it's all accurate because it feels like it is. But while that's happening, you're also kind of getting lured into this argument of regression. You could be, you aren't in the movie, but you could be if you start listening to Tedesco too much.
Well, and I think my main criticism of Tedesco, there's lots to criticize, but one of the primary ones is that Tedesco and folks of his ilk, they interpret the universal church as one that ought to be a uniform church where everything has to look and be the same, right? Like his insistence of like, it should be Italian, it should be Roman, right? It's this insistence, and right, like I think we can all easily read under the guise of that too, is like, oh, that's just white supremacy. But far more than that is the kind of just incorrect theology around interpreting a universal church as one that ought to be uniform. Because again, as Mr. Fiennes says so beautifully in his homily, it's the diversity of the church that makes it special. So Tedesco and folks like Tedesco, and there's a lot of them in the church, and they are predominantly European. They see this universal thing that would be much better if everything looked the same. But I think we all know how silly that is.
Well, and the film plays a little bit with, I really appreciate what you just said, and the specifically colonial dynamics of that when it's, Adeyama representing the African church. And it's like, yeah, that's a place where, as to my understanding, the Catholic Church is really alive and vibrant because of the history of Europe on that continent, right? And now that has become, the global South. So kind of Latin America and Africa are becoming so large in terms of population growth. This obviously echoes what we're seeing in our own politics in this country, that it's the European influence that has brought up these systems in those areas. And now that they're challenging the traditional white power, it's like, oh, whoa, hold on. But why I really liked tracking the 4 candidates this viewing. And one of the things that I thought was a really good conversation around Adeyama is like, there is a very conservative strain in African Catholicism in particular, as is well documented and known about anti-homosexual attitudes in particular, that it takes on a very different dynamic there. And it's playing with that idea of just because his skin color makes him progressive doesn't mean his policies make him progressive. And I really liked kind of his downfall as a flawed figure versus Tedesco, who just takes himself down for being an a-hole at the end, right? And is the only one, I think, who really takes himself out of the running. The rest tend to be exposed by some other player. And I think that is a really interesting plot device put on top of what Karl said about the way those factions are viewed within the church. Those dynamics work well. And you said it, Ralph Fiennes. Amen. Like, he's so good in this. I'm really kind of freshly angry he didn't win. Still,
because
brutal white now.
I think I've probably only seen. Yeah, I think this is the only one I've even seen from that was in the Oscar contention. So again, my apologies for even being here, y'all. But I just after I watched it the first time. That scene where he breaks down in the Pope's former bedroom when he's holding his glasses, my own emotional state immediately mirrored that, and I started crying. And I was like, this just, even though I didn't, right, like he's selling the fact that he really loved that man. And I think there's also I think that's the primary feeling. And to me, as an adult, like, that's honestly how I cry. Like, I try to almost like contain it for a minute and be like, oh, don't cry. And then it just kind of slips out and it becomes like this, just like that tide just washes over you. And it's also so healing in a lot of ways. I don't know. I just, that scene right there. Like I felt it so much, and it just related immensely to like, this is what it looks like when adults cry. And I remember like one of the only times I ever saw my father cry was very similar to that as well. It's like, it's probably part of that, like kind of not so great the misplaced masculinity that says, don't cry, you're a man. But it's almost like there's that reserve too of like, this is a Catholic cardinal. And it's like, oh, like keep those emotions in check. But you can't always, and it's so good when you let it out. So,
his character in the story also serves as like, he's supposed to be the neutral party that's guiding them through this process, right? So I think that's also, you can interpret it also as being part of that, where he has to kind of stuff down his personal feelings about and not grieve. He has to kind of pause his grieving process because there's this other thing that he has to do and get done. So yeah, I agree. The performance is excellent. Did we actually give Ralph Fiennes the letter awards. I don't remember for best actor. We had talked about it. I think we didn't.
We talked about it. I don't think we did.
I think Timmy won.
Timmy got it.
Timmy got it for the double, both Dune and Complete Unknown. We gave him
Dune and Wonka. We just
wrong year, Greg.
Close enough.
All right. So the other question I would have, because so I'm gonna kind of hop ahead to a note that I put in here that was mostly for my benefit, so I would remember. But I was doing super light research before we hopped on about if there was any current relationship between this film and the real life conclave that just concluded. And I was actually very surprised there was more than one article claiming that people who were a part of this current conclave watched the fictional conclave. One article from Politico went so far as to say it was like for guidance. Like they were looking to the film to figure out what they had to do, which seemed bonkers to me. But that's kind of a long way of saying, if people are watching this film, like I know they are, because it was number 2 on Amazon Prime when I watched it earlier. It was like, that was the big thing. It was like number 2 in the rankings. And I'm like, oh, wow, people are really watching this. If they're watching this purely because of real life events, what is the one thing that I have 2 questions. Well, first, what is the one thing you would want them to take away from this movie? And then 2, especially for those who participated in the actual conclave in real life, like what could have, if they watched this during those 2 days, like what could it, well, I guess they couldn't have probably because they were like sequestered, but they knew they were probably going to have to do this. Like if they watched this movie after Pope Francis died, like how, or to what extent do you think that actually might have impacted, and in what way?
That's a great question.
That was like 5
I just want to add that it was top 3 on Letterboxd most favorite, and I was trying to look for at least, I think immediately after Francis died, the 2 popes also got very high, which I thought was interesting as well. So
that movie
that's not answering your question. That's just noting some more data.
That movie actually does a very poor job of representing those 2 popes. So they paint Francis in a super ultra liberal light, and that's just not who he is or who he was. Not that he was like an ultra conservative either, but they paint him like he is the modern day hippie liberal, and it's like that's not who Francis was.
So, very much simplifying the divide.
Yes, and I mean I get what they were doing, but they failed. So
good casting though. Those guys look like those popes.
Young Pope did not make it that high. Just the forgotten Jude Law project.
How about New Pope, the half sequel to Young Pope?
Two Pope, Too Furious, also very high.
Great.
I'll take your serious question. So, I think it sounds silly to me to have the actual cardinals not have like an actual guide for what they should be doing. But what I would wish that they would take away from the movie is that the movie has a core theme about, I think all of the protagonists that you're supposed to like in this film stick to their beliefs and their principles. And you just said that about Ralph Fiennes' character. He actually breaks a lot of rules. He's kind of breaking all the rules throughout the movie, but he's staying directly tied to his faith and his belief in terms of what he thinks is doing right. And the ultimate triumph of Benitez is kind of a showstopper in that scene with the light coming down on them and just kind of that beautiful monologue. But it is all about a reminder of good Christian principles. So, I'm somebody who looks to a lot of professed Christians in the modern world and sees them standing alongside everything the church teaches is wrong. And, current American politics very much implied there, right? And so to see that the film's wholehearted message is actually, there's no way you're going to do this the right way. There's no way you're going to do this without being earthly in your proceedings. But if you are really going to act towards the divine, you have to go with what the divine has given you, which is a conscience, which is belief. And all of the best characters in this film are doing that and, not lying and not scheming. So to me, that would be, I guess, Jen, you're asking me to prescribe homework to the cardinals? Is that the question? Yes. So, dear cardinals, please remember what the church actually teaches and vote with your principles, not your schemes.
Hopefully we're not looking at a John Paul I scenario where we'll be back in like a month and a half to do it again and they can listen to Greg right away.
I think one thing really, really big that I would hope that those in power would take to heart in this film is in fact how much I think the movie does point to the fact that you need to be open, period. You need to be open. Secondly, you need to be open to the fact that God might do something outside the box. I think that's what Benitez character serves. As soon as he was introduced in the movie, I was like, that's going to be the next Pope. I think that was like, unfortunately to me, like there wasn't like really any mystery. It's like, you're not bringing this character in for any other reason. And then the few times his first introduction to the other cardinals where he leads the blessing. And I love it how everybody goes to sit down after the traditional Catholic grace, but he keeps going and he keeps going in the sense of very much this idea of, let's make sure that we're praying for the hungry, those that go without. And, oh, hey, how about the sisters that prepared all this for us? Right. And that's where Rossellini, her character, kind of perks up. But I think one of the shots as well, right? Like when there's that bombing outside of the Sistine Chapel and the window shatters and it's very dramatic with the lighting coming in. But Pope John the 23rd famously said, let's open the windows of the church so that the Holy Spirit can blow in once again. And that's when he called for the Second Vatican Council, which was, this council dedicated to modernizing the church for the modern world of the 1960s. Then you had somebody like John Paul II come in and try everything he could to roll that back. I'm not a fan of John Paul II. But I think what to me, a primary message of this film is trying to say is, step outside of your pettiness, step outside of the boxes that you've created for yourselves and understand that your responsibility here is to be the voice and the presence of God. And I think that in interesting ways, the film almost tries to show you that without it. I don't think it's meant to be like, oh yeah, this light coming in is God's light coming in, but the symbolism is there enough that it says, and Benitez's character also represents that there's an importance in paying attention to something that is outside of the tradition, I think that's what Benitez's character is very much representing, is that, this system is a little bit broken and it's broken because of pettiness. So you need something to shake that up. And I think, right, like the big reveal at the end of the movie is leaning into the fact that, like, stop being so concerned with certainty. Nothing is certain, So yeah, that's the message I would hope that would be gleaned from this story.
Yeah, this time around, I think I picked up more on the kind of, what's the word? Not unity. Yeah, not unity, and not symmetry, but like the circular nature of the screenplay, that the homily that you keep referencing at the beginning of certainty is the enemy of tolerance. Certainty leaves no room for faith. Like, I almost wish they hadn't put that in the trailer, to be honest, because it's so good. Mm-hmm. I'd seen it so many times before I watched the movie. I was like, oh, they should have saved this. I get why it was in the trailer because it's so good. But anyway, but in the final scene, right, Benitez says, I know what it is to exist between the world's certainties, right? So like he actually, in terms of the themes of the movie, if we look at those two moments, really kind of is the answer to Cardinal Lawrence's call for, like, I really hope the Pope that we elect understands doubt, right?
Yeah, and I think, I don't know if this is a like the lesson I'd want them to take away, but I do think there is something to the approach that I think everyone ultimately takes, like, even though, maybe Benitez never does, because Benitez is pure and is like, I just vote for the person I think has to do it. But everybody else, even Lawrence, ends up in that sort of bartering component. That's sort of like, this is vote getting, this is whipping, this is trying to get the bill passed. This is, it's functionally not that different from the plot of Lincoln, of just, we got to get the votes to get what we what we need passed. And that feels so worldly, and it feels almost like venal, not venial, but venal, and like just so, grimy to be like, well, this is supposed to be like this thing and it's holy and godly, but like we're really like horse trading a little bit about like who's our guy and who like what factions do we pull together. But I think sort of to like what you were saying, Karl, that's how you get your principles across. That's how you get to where you're able to actually express what it is that you think needs to be expressed. Is you have to actually accomplish it. And it's not bad to think of this as we're a group that needs to finish this. And, we don't need to actually all sit in silence and hope there's some divine inspiration. Like, we also are able to talk to each other and figure out what's the best way forward. Hopefully that's Leo the 14th. Like, maybe he'll be really good. Seems like he's in line with Francis from the little bit that I read, but we'll see. We'll see if that's how they ended up this time around, at least.
I really like your point, PT, and I think the thing that made me think of was that I think that is the point you're making about the secular versus the holy, right? Well, they're really, at the end of the day, just men with ambitions, and they need this political process to kind of advance their ideas, which the ideas themselves might be like very like wholesome or sincere, right? But then they have this like kind of compromising process they have to go through to express those ideas and advance them. But I think that that's why the film spends so much time, especially at the beginning, establishing what we originally were complimenting about the film, of this, the care and the reverence with which it shows all of the ritual and what is sacred, and the ornateness and the kind of mystique of all of the practices of the Catholic Church, right? And particularly as manifested in the Vatican. I think that's a good distinction to make. But yeah, I think that's why the film takes so much time to show that and to kind of create that sense of wonder around all the costumes and the props and the rituals and stuff like that, because then it's like a huge stark contrast to the very, like you're saying, like kind of grimy, icky political process, like the most secular thing we could force these people to be doing is politicking, right?
I was thinking about the conclave and the idea of the sequestration, right? That you separate from the world. And, again, I think one of the ideas the film demonstrates in its plotting and in its characters is it's actually that separateness from the world that has created the griminess, and not understanding that. So the moment Karl referenced, which is my pick for what shouldn't have been in the trailer, is the bomb blowing in the window, which, I still don't get why they put that in the trailer. But that is the incursion of the outside world, right? And that is also Benitez, right? That Benitez, everything that makes Benitez fit for this job is because they have real lived experience and haven't been separate as a part of this. So again, it's far too early to form opinions about this new pope who's been elected. But, one of the things that I saw in his biography is like, oh, he's been inside the church for a long time and actually working in Rome now. Now, he has kind of some Benitez like worldly experience. He ministered for a long time in Peru, which is hope, makes me hopeful, right? He's lived the life. He's seen some of those things, because I think the film is reminding us that, like, just the fact that Catholic institution becomes so separate from the real world is a problem. And when Karl referenced the light of that explosion, one of the things that struck me this viewing, purely because I was trying to watch this in the middle of the day in my bright living room, is this is a dark movie, like physically dark. There were a lot of scenes I could not see. And I think it adds to that sense of claustrophobia, and how the problem that leads to PT's griminess, not PT's griminess, but the griminess he described, is that it is dark and isolated and enclosed. And it's, a very clear symbol at the end when the blinds open and they're all, released back into the light and a part of that. So I really like that about Benitez. And Benitez learned everything they know about their faith through lived experience. They only learned their full self and that they were intersects because they were hurt in a car bomb, right? Like that's that kind of real life experience that I think the movie suggests is what would make a good pope and would make a good leader of this institution. It's turtles escaping from the pond and going out about the patio, sometimes getting hit by cars, but then coming back.
Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't the end of that story that they get run over?
But are they all the way down, Greg?
Yes, all the way down.
All right, so I guess what I want to talk about next is, I feel like we maybe implicitly already answered this, but now that we have a little bit more distance from the film, because I remember from our original review, we sort of went back and forth about, like, is this just an allegory for American politics, or is this actually about the Catholic Church, or is it what is the thematic takeaway of this, right? Like, what is it really about? Does anyone are your thoughts about that different now that we're kind of farther out from watching the movie for the first time? I feel like our conversation implies that it is very much about the church and religion and faith, but there's also, like, I remember early critics really fixated on the references to American politics.
Mm-hmm. I think part of that was the timing of when it came out, which was right around the election, so it felt pretty inevitable to, like, make those comparisons and everything. It was so immediate and prominent, and I think that's obviously there, in the story, but I think it's more about the conflict between progression versus regression, and are we looking forward or looking back? And that obviously is a big factor in civic political debates in global, and from the global level to the local level, but it is also true in all, I would assume all organized religions, but particularly this one. So I think now that we're in the context of, we just had a real conclave, like the actual, like they were doing it, the cardinals, they had the hats, like all of that is happening now, like in the same way that the, like, actual, like, national American election was happening last time, does make it feel like it's more about the church. But I think it's about these cultural movements and how do we respond to them, and how does someone, sticking with Ralph Fiennes, Lawrence as our main character, how do you navigate that when you are sort of feeling lost and uncertain if you buy into any of this anymore?
I can't really weigh in because I only watched it for the first time like 2 months ago. So.
That's fair. That's fair.
I'm always very slow at getting to Greg's recommendations. I'm sorry, Greg.
No worries.
I knew I wanted to get.
That's right. We too.
And yeah, it blew me away. And I mean, it clearly does have something to say about modern American politics. There's really no question about that. But I think it might even be a commentary on the fact of, Greg kind of referenced this earlier about, lots of vocal and platformed Christians, specifically in the US right now, who really don't espouse Christian ideals by any means. And, I think this also raises the question of, like, what is the role of religion in politics, right? How should your church, specifically the Catholic Church, which is the largest organized Christian church in the world, what should be its interplay there? Should it get sucked down into the mire of messy politics, or should it somehow transcend it? And I think this movie, to me, opens the reality of, like, you got to be open to transcendence. And it's imperative for a religious institution to be open to that. I think when you have the fact that, like, none of us are blind to the fact that there is this large Christian contingent that called for the vote of a very non-Christian candidate who is now destroying things for all of us. And I think to somehow think that to miss the central message of Christianity so profoundly, to lift up a candidate who is so full of hate, to me, this movie is a very clear indictment to a degree of those ways in which politics have reduced even the credibility of Christianity in so many ways, and honestly, rightfully so in many ways, because you have these voices that have so many people listening to them and look to them as having this particular voice of authority, with the hopes that that is a voice of transcendent authority. And yet they are in no way mirroring the message from which they come. So I think this movie does a really good job of saying, how is your religion getting involved with the politics of the world? And if it's getting distorted by them, I think it also raises the question of how faithful is that religious tradition to what it claims to be. And right, like I think we've seen like the evangelical right movement has done a lot to destroy Christianity because of their profound ignorance of the message of the gospel. So, I think this movie has something to say about that intersectionality and the dangers of that. Not that intersectionality is inherently dangerous, but the danger that it can actually pose to religion is that it reduces religion. Like so many of those little scenes where they're having their private meetings, and like Greg pointed out so wonderfully, like they're often in the dark. There's such that secretiveness, that almost like behind the scenes plotting. It feels like, is this just a bunch of lobbyists then? Right. Tell my support, like even right. Who probably in all of our eyes, kind of the good guy, Bellini, right. Who I want to point out the fact that Bellini looks a lot like my favorite Catholic priest, James Martin. He's a very popular Jesuit priest who does a lot for trying to bridge the church's not so great history with the LGBTQ plus community, and does lots of good things to help bridge that breakdown. But I love that Bellini, to me, looked just like James Martin. I was like, oh man, James Martin is not like that in a lot of ways, but he's certainly very progressive. But yeah, even like, I think that even Bellini though looks a bit monstrous in scenes when he kind of berates Lawrence for pretending like he doesn't have some sort of desire to become Pope. It's even clear that he also has been corrupted by the game. And I think, I think that's an important thing to be looking at and to be talking about, in regards to how politics intersect with organized religion.
I think he and Tedesco are the only ones who use the word war to describe what's happening, right? And I mean, obviously, it's interesting because I think I agree that I think the film, at no point when I'm watching this film did I feel like the film was trying to invite me to like consider both sides. Like, what I mean? Like, oh, Tedesco, like let's understand no, it's not trying to do that. Right. Like which, so it's made its kind of stance of who we should be siding with very clear. But at the same time, like with what you're talking about of Bellini, he's almost corrupted by pragmatism, right? Because he's the one who's like, wake up, Lawrence, this is a war, we gotta do whatever it takes to win. Like, we're not talking about finding the truth or sticking to our principles, even though it is what he said he was going to do at the beginning, right? I don't know if any of you remember, where he's like, just let everybody know that I am not going to compromise on any of my political ideals just to get votes. And then he spends the rest of the movie trying to make everyone compromise to get more votes so Tedesco doesn't win. So I do think it's very telling that like we just see it in very different contexts, right? Him saying this is a war, right? Again, why is that in the trailer? We watched that too many times before I saw this movie. It kind of lost its luster, I think, by the time I actually saw it. Whereas Tedesco, very, very kind of hateful declaration of war, where he's like, those people out there, right? They're the ones that we need to be fighting them and killing them because otherwise our way of life is going extinct, right? It's interesting that it's like a very dangerous slippage between the two. Like, you know what I mean? Like one is only a couple clicks from the other potentially.
Yeah, there is a degree underneath all of it where it's like, are you that far away from this thing that you don't like?
Yeah. Or do you have to become the thing that you don't like to beat it? Right.
Just want to share the shout out to Stanley Tucci because he's really good in this movie. And this is a pro Stanley Tucci podcast. Jen, you said your favorite Stanley Tucci role of all time was Electric State that came out earlier this year. So people should check out that episode of Long Take Review. I just wanted to answer the initial question because I didn't get a crack at it and say that for me, this viewing was not about the conclave or the election in America. To me, it was about all human institutions, right? Like, I don't know, I think I'm not going to call out my current workplace, but like this felt in some ways like a really toxic work environment, right? Like where everything that humans touch becomes innately political, right? And I'm sure you all encounter this with your work with students that, you know, whatever context you're working with them, they're like, well, I don't want to talk about politics. And, you know, I think some of the best art being created right now, looking at you, Andor, reminds us that, you know, everything is politics, that there's no separating politics out of everything. And you know, I think this goes back farther back to Karl's initial comments about, like, you know, this shouldn't be that, but yet it is, right? There's no way that the divine can just take over and rule this, because it's a human institution and it's a part of that. So to me, it's your workplace, it's your extended family, it's your club you go play pickleball with. It's like anything man creates is corrupted by the fallen state of man. So much like the film Electric State, corrupted by the fallen state of man.
Why won't you let this film go? Everyone else,
it's my new megalopolis. I just keep going with whatever the flop is until we watch something worse.
All right. I don't know if Electric State. Well, okay, let's not get into it. I don't know if Electric State is the level of flop that Megalopolis was, but we'll put a pin in that for another day.
If I may make another Star Wars connection, because I know you all like those films as well. I do think something interesting about the movie is, of course, again, going into the sense of how mired it is by modern politics. It makes me think of something referenced in the Revenge of the Sith novelization, which I refer to as the Gospel of Matthew Stover, and excited to have Greg join us on Wampus Lair next week to talk about that book. But something pointed out in that novel is Obi-Wan has this recollection of how the Jedi High Council used to really take its time making big decisions, that it would, you know, sit together and commune with the Force and try to really hear what the will of the Force was. And Obi-Wan is reflecting on how, like, he only really knows this by rumor. He's never experienced that because he's only been on the High Council during a war. And there's actually a small scene in one of the Clone Wars episodes, I believe it's in season 5, where you see them trying to make a big decision and they all gather around Yoda and they put their hands on him. And there's this moment where they're trying to commune with the Force. And I bring that up just to say that, like, I think Conclave is indicating that even something as sacred and as longstanding tradition as a conclave, how far has it fallen from what its intended reality was to be, right? And I will say, after I watched Conclave the first time, I got really interested in papal history, because my concentration when I was in grad school was actually scripture and a little bit of like spirituality. So church history has never been like, I know the broad strokes, but I'm not a church historian. So I did a lot of like reading and watching videos on like the history of the papacy, because I just wanted to learn more about it. And what's really interesting, there were some cardinals interviewed who had been at the conclave that elected Pope Francis, and they talked a lot about how, while there is obviously conversation during the process of conclave, that it is a relatively quiet and contemplative space. And I do wonder how much maybe the movie does sidestep that reality, that perhaps that is in there more than the movie is giving credit to. And right, not to say that like God shows up in some big profound way and says like, here is my pick. Yeah, I don't think it quite works that way. But I do think that there's a hoped for expectation within this process that people are quieting down to listen to something bigger than the voices of flawed humanity. And to me, like, that's the one thing, while I've never been at a conclave, I will say when Pope Benedict was elected, I was a freshman in college and all my friends put up Karl for Pope signs when the conclave started. And I was really excited that, because technically anyone can be elected Pope. It's not going to happen outside of the cardinals, but it technically could. But
if only they had more reach.
Yeah, if only 19-year-old Karl just wasn't sequestered to Syracuse, New York. You know, I think that is like the one small thing that I think Conclave did maybe miss out on a little bit, was making sure to show that there is space created within this traditional gathering where there is a profound intentionality towards trying to commune with the spirit that transcends the system. I think the movie is very much focused more so on the fact that, unfortunately, because of the flawedness of humanity, they're missing the point. I'd like to think that even the conclave that just wrapped earlier today, there was more than just political lobbying. And I think that's maybe the one thing, again, while I certainly don't know in any way from experience, but from the bits that I've gleaned from my brief studies over the past 2 months, I think that's the only thing maybe that the movie wasn't being a little more faithful to, was the fact that it's a little less lobbying and perhaps a little more contemplation.
Contemplation hard to capture.
Right. Yeah. Who wants to watch a bunch of guys just sitting there?
Are there now I'm thinking to ask the question, are there other parallels that anyone, because I haven't really read up on the news from today and about the newly elected Pope Leo, but are there other parallels that you can see between the real life conclave and the fictional one in the film? From what I don't know, maybe you also haven't read it as much as
well. I wasn't doing was tracking the candidates. I did know that there was, I believe, a Filipino cardinal who people thought had a very strong chance, but who I believe it was also LGBTQ issues, like the candidate in Conclave, where it was like, yeah, they're pretty harsh. They're pretty harshly, conservative, regressive on that. They are not looking to be open, welcoming, expansive. I don't know if many of the actual candidates were. I don't think there was anybody like solidly in the running who had the Stanley Tucci like, let's be a little more open-minded, like that. The way he says it when he's laying out his campaign bullet points and how he's going to stick to his principles. That. I don't know if anyone was actually doing that, but there was that sort of parallel of like, oh, wouldn't it be great to get someone from this part of the world and get that like new perspective in, but like with a big sort of asterisk of, if what you're looking for is progress, there's going to be a lack of progress in one important section of the theology.
The only other conclave I'm an expert on is the one in Angels and Demons. So I really haven't read any news today. This felt more accurate than that one, although less Ewan McGregor, which is a shame, I think. So
the only thing I saw was that Pope Leo was not actually considered a main contender. And so that was the thing where I was like, oh, like Benitez, like kind of came out of nowhere and everyone at the last minute voted for or something like that. But I didn't have time to like go in depth about that. I just heard that.
But instead of a prayer for the grace, he just brought deep dish pizza to everybody. Yeah. And that's why they're like, well, maybe.
He's been in Peru for the past like 30 years or something, right? Like
he's been in the Vatican for at least the past 5, actually.
Oh, okay.
He was very close with Francis, and there's that really, I love that little moment at the beginning of Conclave when Stanley Tucci's character does say like, "Do you think I can keep the chessboard?" Like indicating all those times together playing chess together. I think in an interesting way, as you were kind of referencing, PT, the fact that Bellini in the movie goes into it with, all the buzzes that he's going to be the next pope. And then as we quickly learn, like he doesn't stand a chance. And I'm blanking on the name of the cardinal from the Philippines. But there was a lot of buzz that he might in fact be the next pope, but I mean, who knows how, maybe I'm sure he got some votes. I don't know how many, but I think there is that parallel. And actually that's something else I want to point out that I really like from kind of the early part of the film is there is a lot of references to these folks that had very close relationships with that Pope, that Pope, Ralph Fiennes at the beginning, when he has that one single tear. I love when a single tear comes out of somebody's eye. Like Anakin in Revenge of the Sith sells me every time when he's looking across to Padme. It just works for me. But, I think the movie very quickly establishes that this Pope who has just passed away had profoundly intimate relationships with several of his cardinals. And I mean that in all the appropriate ways. He was very close. He very much cared about these people. And I think one of the most telling quotes towards the beginning of the film that Bellini, Tucci's character, mentions is that, he lost faith. And I love when Fiennes replies with, "In God? No, never in God, in the church." And it's like, there is a small part of me that's like, ooh, I don't know. Like, I'm sure like that did rub some more conservative minded Catholics the wrong way. Cause like, oh, the Pope would never lose faith in the church. And there is something about that does seem like potentially a bit inauthentic, but I think that's a starting point of jumping off for this picture, is that even this Pope who has just recently passed had these profound relationships and was comfortable enough within the confines of these close relationships to express this particular doubt he had. And his doubt is in the institution. And then the movie goes on to it's painting the picture as to probably this is why he lost faith. This is what the infighting looks like. So to be the leader of that particular institution and see all of this us versus them mentality, it would make sense that, to me, that's one of the saddest quotes, but also beautiful quotes of the film, is the fact that he lost faith in that very thing that is meant to be God's representative on earth. Like, that is really the sole vocation of the church, is to try to invite people into that ever expanding community that is what churches ought to be. And he's lost faith in that, because it seems like that has forgotten what its mission was.
I want to collapse those 2 points together, Karl, because they're both good points. And to me, that is, we don't learn a lot about the dead Pope, but the gamesmanship there, I think, is what the rest of the movie is based on, right? So the rest of the movie is, we are seeing, Stanley Tucci says he was always 7 moves ahead of me. So you're right. Bellini enters into the game thinking he knows how to win this game. And the Pope has been 7 moves ahead, the dead Pope, and embraces that. And I think that is the testament to his lack of faith in the system and in the institution, right? So he didn't trust this conclave to find the right successor. So he completed all those moves 7 steps ahead in order to make sure that the right candidate won. And what I think I ended on that metaphor last time we reviewed this movie or something, the like gamesmanship. But the other piece of that's then interesting to me is, one of those moves was to send Benitez to get his reassignment surgery, essentially, right? Or, to clarify his gender. And I don't know if that's the right word. That feels gross, but yeah, to get his hysterectomy.
You're using the language of the movie, so
yeah. So the fact that Benitez then didn't get the surgery, I think then suggests that even when you're the gamesman moving 7 steps ahead, that you can't control the actual outcome or the actual will. So I think those all work together in those points you were making.
This is not exactly relevant to all these great points people are making. I do just want to note, and I don't know if anyone has anything to add to this, even though I knew the story this time, I still felt for the first 15 minutes of this movie that it was a murder mystery. That like, it's this person's dead and all these people are around and they're starting to make their angles, and set up what they're going to do going forward and who wants what and who's in control of which information. And the music has that kind of like boom, boom, boom. Like it has that like building sense of tension. And, I could see this time of like, oh, they're all positioning for their candidacy, so to speak, of what they're going to go. And Lawrence is just sort of reacting to all of that and this loss that he's confronting. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's because that's what I thought it was going to be when I first saw it. I just knew it was a mystery and a thriller. And was surprised that it wasn't that. And if that just carried forward, or if it is sort of giving intentionally sort of leading you astray slightly to try to lure you in, because people might not really want to hear a debate about the direction of a major international global religious institution on its face, as opposed to like who did this thing, and what are the secrets.
I do think they treat Cardinal Tremblay's scandal as if he murdered the Pope. You know what I mean? Like in terms of how people are acting about it, and like it is I think intentionally pulling from a lot of murder mystery tropes to sort of like. But I think the film is true. It's not. I don't know if I think the film. It might functionally be this, but I don't think the film is trying to fake us out in that sense. I think it's more saying if the point of the movie is to elect a new pope, that there's like the mystery and kind of secrets and stuff shrouded in this process is as thrilling and exciting as a murder mystery. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's what it's trying to do, at least visually, and in terms of how it's pulling from the genre of the murder mystery, especially at the beginning.
I think if it was to be a murder mystery, instead of just saying who's the last person who had a meeting, they would have done a little rundown of like, well, were there any foreign elected officials who forced their way in to visit him the day before and made sure that was a prime suspect?
Yeah, I will say, because I knew nothing about the movie before watching it. I mean, I knew obviously it was about a papal conclave, but I knew nothing else. And I had a particular expectation of what the movie was going to be. And in the first 5 minutes, I was like, whoa, this is not the type of movie I thought it was going to be. And in all the best ways possible. And you know, PT, as you referenced, I love the soundtrack. I was reading some like theology at the start of the year, getting ready for the season of Lent. And as I was reading it, all I was listening to was the Conclave soundtrack. And I was like, it really makes this theological breakdown feel very ominous. So, but
it's great music to grade papers by. I would just say.
The music says we are far from ordinary time.
I think it's time to dip back into Oscars. I guess it's still Oscars watch, even though the watch has ended.
Yeah, we're looking back.
Yeah. I'm picturing Conan doing Nikki Glazer's bit, wearing the Pope hat. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, this one had got 8 nominations, was a huge contender. People, especially towards the end of the race, myself included, were like, what if it's just Conclave? Like, what if Conclave takes it? And that turned out not to be true. It only won 1 of its 8 nominations. But I guess my question is, did the Academy do right by this film? Like, do you feel like it got what it should have gotten in terms of wins or nominations, I guess? Although it got a lot of nominations, so it's probably okay on that front. But yeah, do you think the Academy got it right, got it wrong? What could have happened differently? Would you have given it a different Oscar?
It's so interesting just to think about the question of cultural relevancy, because obviously current events have made this very popular again. But there's a way in which Conclave feels so much more important than Brutalist or Complete Unknown or Wicked in some ways. Like, Wicked's a stretch. Sorry, Jen. I understand Wicked's a stretch. Yeah,
Jen
we're defying gravity. Come on. Yeah. But I do. It's just really interesting because I think when we do Oscar Fairy and we look back like 10 years, we're like, well, this movie so much defines that moment. It should have won Best Picture. And it so rarely is the one that won Best Picture that feels that way, right? So in some ways, because of everything we've just been talking about the overlap of politics and, you know, this just feels like such a current, this is our times on film movie. It almost makes me tempted to be very outlandish and say, no, this should have just won it all, and, you know, take away all the Brutalist. I was gonna say take away all Timmy's awards, but Timmy didn't get any award. He got a Golden Globe, right? No, he got a SAG. Yeah. He got just a SAG.
But you know what? And that's what he wants. He wants to be the greatest. So it fueled him. It helps him be the next MJ.
I mean, if you think about it, Benitez is the greatest unknown. So sorry, Timmy.
No. No. Sorry, Mr. Zimmerman. I will disagree with Greg in that, like, I do think that there's an argument. We did sort of end up with the race kind of jostling back and forth between Adrian Brody in The Brutalist and Timothée Chalamet for A Complete Unknown, it does feel like, why couldn't that have been Ralph Fiennes? Like, why couldn't he have risen over and taken
because everyone thought he had already won an Oscar.
Well, I mean,
That's the only reason.
Two people thought that, and they got quoted extensively, but they did think that. I don't know. It'll be interesting when The Brutalist hits streaming, because I don't think it's going to get a big bump because it's still 3.5 hours, and folks will be like, I don't know, whatever. What's VistaVision? But I think that adapted screenplay pretty strong. If it was only going to win one, I might shift it to Best Actor and let Nickel Boys win adapted screenplay. We're not doing Oscar Fairy right now. I do think that in the context of the race, adapted screenplay makes sense. I'm also the biggest Honora fan of the group here, so I wouldn't have wanted it to lose, take over Best Picture. But for those people who are softer on Honora and wanted this to win, I understand that. I don't agree, but I understand.
Karl, you may not be as steeped in Oscarology. In fact, I know that you aren't, and that's a good thing.
So every year there's
very
these
healthy
awards. It's called the Academy
Awards. But what I mean is that, like, when you look at the list of all the things that Conclave got nominated for, was there a win that would have made you personally very happy? Like, is it Ralph Fiennes?
I mean, yes, but I also don't know the competition, right? So, like, I'm just. Yeah,
that's why you have the luxury of doing that, right? Like, just.
Which, I mean, it's easy to say this guy should win it, but it's the only one I saw. So, I'm not a credible narrator on this particular question, although I appreciate it. I mean, to me, like I was saying earlier when I talked about Saoirse, right? I think Fiennes made me feel something profound in that scene, and that's what I want from an actor. And Timothée Chalamet has never made me feel anything profound. Now, granted, I didn't see him in The Greatest Unknown. He's a fine Paul Atreides, but I think it was a cookie cutter role that many people could have played just as well. I mean, based off my very limited experience, it would have been really cool to see Ralph Fiennes win for Best Actor. Because I felt lots of things with him, and I think he serves as our emotional center and anchor of this film. And as Greg pointed out earlier, he is kind of the why am I blanking on the word of when you don't pick sides? Neutral. There we go. He is very much the neutral character, but who is a man of faith. I think he made me feel something. So I wish he had won for Best Actor. Who did win for Best Actor? The guy from Brutalist?
Yes,
Adrian Brody.
Adrian Brody.
Yeah.
Some say he's still talking. He's still giving a speech.
Gave just an all-time stinker of a speech. I'm so far behind listening to podcasts. I'm just listening to everybody's Oscar reactions, and universally everybody's like, he had like 1 minute worth of good material that he stretched into 10.
Sounds like a sermon in a regular Sunday church. So
amazing.
I have to be on brand and say the real crime is Ralph Fiennes not winning for Grand Budapest Hotel, which I continue to revisit. I actually think it's such a great performance. We've sung its praises. If it had just a little bit of that manic Gustav energy to it, I think there could have been something to that, like just spicing up some of those moments a little bit. But he's so good in that, and of course is incredible in Schindler's List. I do think a fun episode would be to rank the most deserving actors who have been ignored by the Academy. But I think he would be very high on my list of we don't appreciate him enough. And The English Patient, geez, forgetting another Best Picture winner that he was in. So ridiculous.
Can I just point out that I do find it sort of silly that it was nominated for Best Costumes when it's just like, these are just what these guys wear. So, I know that's so what a costume is in a period piece, but like they are really cool costumes, but it's also like, that's just what they wear though there too. So
but they replicated them so well.
Yeah, they really did. And I like that.
Actually, don't think they did. I think they went on record saying they just went to the shop that all the other that the Cardinals go to and just ordered like the regular thing. So it agrees with you, Karl, your point.
Well, I also just kind of chuckled because when I quickly glanced at the name of the costume designer, I didn't notice that the last name I think it's Crystal, ends with an L, but I thought it was an exclamation point. So I was like, I guess Jen's very excited that her last name is Christ. So
Lizzie Christ.
But I was like, oh, that's an L, not an exclamation point.
That's so funny. So my rebuttal against the costume thing is that when I was watching it, my husband John watched part of it with me when I was rewatching it earlier today, and he noticed that each cardinal has their own custom cross that they wear, and he was like, "That's so cool." They have their own little, like, it's sort of like a reflection of their flair.
They're kind of crystal.
I was just gonna say it's the Applebee's flair of the church.
My counter to your counter, Jen, is that Dune Part 2 was not nominated in costume design, and it could have been instead of this movie.
Oh, but it was okay. Oh man,
I'm just saying.
All right, you don't play the Dune card. That's a cheap move. I personally probably would have been really happy if this had actually not just because I had predicted it and didn't want to be wrong, but which you all know that's not a factor at all in how I feel about anything. But best editing would have actually made me happy because I did really, really enjoy the editing of this, and I think the pacing is perfect. And what I was talking about earlier with like cutting away to just the artwork, the windows, the ceilings, the turtles, there's so much kind of intercut into this that makes it richer as a story. That one I would have been okay with letting go for Nora. I don't know. Yeah, I think that some of these I'm looking at them, I'm like, oh, this is really suffering from the new trend in the Oscars where one movie that everybody loves, people just like check all the boxes for.
Yeah.
Even if it's a very deserving movie, it is kind of like making it so that we don't spread the wealth as much, which I would prefer. So,
well, and to that point, I would say it's a tiny role, but Isabella Rossellini deserves a career Oscar, and I can say this and make Antonio cry somewhere. Zoe Saldana, has a long career ahead and will get other cool roles. So I might take away. That's the only one Emilia Perez ended up with, right? Was hers? No, the song.
It also got the song.
Okay.
Remember when the lady sang?
Emilia.
Oh yeah,
it's also still happening somehow.
Sometimes I forget moments from the Oscars. Sometimes I block out moments from the Oscars. That's
one that you blacked out, right?
She just deserves one because it's been a long, great career. I would have given her it for being Marcel's grandma because that's the time Isabella Rossellini made me cry the most. So anyway. Jen, you told a joke recently on the internet about when you try to end a show and your co-hosts don't let you. So I'm living up to that.
Yes. Shout out to Dan from the Nostalgia Test. Really, really bringing in the podcaster memes in a way that I feel seen. All right. But I do I am trying to end. We have one more segment that I wanted to do. So usually in our regular episodes, we start with the recommendation algorithm at the top, like near the beginning of the show, because we want to say like, well, who is this for? Who's going to like it? Who should tune in? But I think for these, I want to take us out with the recommendation algorithm in which we establish the audience of a film. But specifically focus on other recommendations we would make. So pretend someone just finished Conclave. What are the tiles underneath that we would recommend that they watch next?
I'll say something quick because I probably won't have anything remarkably profound because, again, I don't watch movies like you all do. But it's also a relatively recent film that Greg also put me onto, which is Heretic. And I would say in the sense of it has a lot to say about conversations around religion and belief. And I think that there is an element of that in Conclave. It's more horror, obviously, than thriller, but there is that kind of edge of your seat energy to it. I think Heretic doesn't quite stick the landing in the way that Conclave does. I think Conclave is a far better picture. But yeah, Heretic also asks some big questions like Conclave does around the avenue of religion. There's also a Netflix series that I know it's not a movie, and Greg, it's the one with Kristen Bell and the young rabbi.
I haven't watched that yet.
Oh, I thought you had. Sorry. What the heck is that called? But obviously, nobody wants this. Yeah. So again, not a movie, but but also has really cool contemporary things to say about the importance of religion and the effects that it has on people's lives. So obviously this is me in role of chaplain, like obviously really just pigeonholing myself to the fact of like Conclave asked some cool stuff about religion. Here's some other cool big questions asked about religion today.
It's not pigeonholing yourself. It's leveraging your expertise, Karl. Come on. Let's get on with the branding.
Thanks,
okay.
Jen.
Jen is here to offer the rhetorical support to help you position yourself to better advertise things. I'm going to mention a movie that I sort of referenced briefly in passing and I hadn't thought about for this, but once I said it, I was like, that is what I would want to recommend. And that's Lincoln by Steven Spielberg. It's not about religion, but it is about this process of trying to make something happen and trying to get to if not a unanimous agreement, some degree of consensus, or at least get past the post to get something done, while also having this underpinning of who are we, what is this institution or this sort of entity we're a part of, and where do we want to move it to? How do we want to, exist? Are we moving forward, or are we going to try to like be so like anchored by tradition and held back by the things we've had before? So I will say that if that element is what you liked, the sort of the political games, go actually into politics, and you still get costumes, you still get like in different locations, like not modern locations. And yeah, you get some good cinematography by a expert director. So you'll have a good time.
You just made me realize that maybe I would recommend Steven Spielberg's The Post.
Oh, also a good movie.
Because
it's just two letters off Pope. It's right there.
Thanks, Greg. No, but it has a similar thing of like swap out the Catholic Church for journalism, as in terms of the institutional commentary and stuff like that, because I think it is a lot about journalistic integrity and caving to sort of pragmatism and outside forces and stuff like that. And there's also like secret documents that get discovered. So I think it's an underrated movie. I liked it at the time when it came out.
It's a good movie. We might be talking about it sometime soon on the Long Take Review. It's
That's
a 2017
like one of
movie.
only 4 Spielberg movies I've never seen.
Oh.
Also Munich, which came up in an episode we may or may not have recorded yesterday. Those are like very, very few Spielberg movies I have not seen. My serious one would be, if you fell in love with Ralph Fiennes, then definitely go watch Grand Budapest Hotel, because it's so phenomenal. And, just like this is so relevant to our times, Grand Budapest, if you have not watched it in recent times, feels starkly relevant now when you think about kind of the fallen state of the world and the rise of fascism again in our times. It's just a phenomenal movie in every regard. My stupid answer is, if you spent all movie vaping along with Tedesco and just taking a sweet hit every time, then there's only one place to go, and it's Dogma, the other faith-based movie that made me ask big faith questions. I thought that movie was profound when I was a high schooler, and I don't think I can recommend that. But part of why I'm mentioning it is it's actually about to come back to theaters, and it's kind of wild, the path of that movie into our culture, and then like very far out of our culture. And that's actually just all of Kevin Smith, right? There was a time when Kevin Smith felt like the most important filmmaker of his generation, and then he just kept making the same movie over and over again. And then he made Jersey Girl. Like, there's that one, but but Dogma has a lot of fun. There were a couple times when somebody, each of you was talking, that I wanted to bring up, quotes from Dogma, and it's also Matt Damon and Ben Affleck having a great time, if nothing else. So check out Dogma if you haven't.
And for anyone curious, the reason it wasn't out for a while is because it was personally owned by Harvey Weinstein, and Kevin Smith wouldn't give him money for it because he had gone to jail and is a bad person. And so it was not available anywhere because Harvey Weinstein wanted money to let it go. And I don't know how they worked it out, but someone worked it out, and now it's coming back. Does it hold up? I don't know, but I'm with Greg. I did like it when it came out, and I remember Matt and Ben being quite fun in it.
Has anyone seen First Reformed? Greg probably has.
No.
No,
that's one that I've only heard great things about, and that Ethan Hawke turns in an all-time performance.
So that's what the internet is telling me is a good recommendation.
Paul Schrader,
so
Greg's friend Paul Schrader, who signed one of his posters.
You want a signed movie poster from Paul Schrader?
Nice.
Oh, Canada. That's how you have to say it.
Okay. On that note, Karl, I'm so glad we got to talk about Conclave again. Thank you for giving us a reason to return to this movie. It was really great. I'm glad we both that I had an excuse to rewatch it, but also that we got to discuss it. Where can folks find you on the internet if they want to, if they have more questions about papal history, and and what's going on with the Wampa's Lair, if you want to plug anything?
Sure. I mean, yeah, if you're interested in my weird Star Wars takes, which often do have a bit of spirituality interspersed because of what I'm interested in personally and what I do professionally. You can find Wampa's Lair podcast anywhere you get podcasts. We're on YouTube, on social Instagram at Wampa's Lair. That's really it. If you want really good movie stuff, just stay here in the long take. I can't help you with that. I would just reference you to my friend Greg. Thank you so much for making space for me and letting me be on this. Yeah, it was super fun. I always love hearing the three of you talk about anything. You're three of the smartest people I've ever met. And I think you guys just, the conversations that you have, always challenge my mode of thinking. And I think that's what brilliant people do. So thank you for your brilliance and making space for my amateurness.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say. And I think my hope for this guest list series was that we would bring in our friends that could offer like a unique perspective on a film that we wouldn't have, right? And do the exact same thing you're saying, is like expanding kind of our thinking on it. And I think you've absolutely done that with this movie. So thank you so much.
My hope for this series was that people would come on and say nice things about us. So thank you for that.
Greg, I wasn't joking with your intro. You are the busiest person in podcasting that I know. Tell us what you're up to without spoiling Andor, because I still haven't watched it.
Well, first of all, I'm really regretting that dogma reference after being called smart. So
you did preface it with "This is my stupid answer," so.
And you're reminding us you're still a man of the people. You know,
that's true. So. That's true. I see it all. I see it all. So let's see. I'm podcasting regularly. Currently co-hosting Through the Glass Columns, a podcast about Wheel of Time, the television show, and the book series. So if you are looking for a summer reads book project and want to start there, all our episodes are available. You can go back to book 1 and have a 3-year book club with us, reading 2 chapters of Wheel of Time at a time. I'm also on the Rebel Base Card feed. Still on this recording, the last episode that dropped was PT joining us to talk about the second wave of Andor. I actually don't know when Jen's releasing this episode, so maybe the whole season of Andor is done by now, and we'll have it all available for that. Other than that, you can find me on Instagram and Letterboxd at EyonCanon, EYEONCANON. Hey, Karl said everybody who enters the Vatican wears a cassock. And do you know who that's true for? Ethan Hunt in Mission Impossible 3. Check out my Letterboxd, where I just reviewed Mission Impossible 3 on our road to the final reckoning. Get ready. We've got 16 episodes of content I'm preparing on that film when it comes out. PT, where can people find you? Make me stop talking.
Well, I will say this is only playing into Dan Dissinger's meme and Jen's problem that I'm saying something. We did in this house start watching the Clone Wars. Jasmine finally was like, "I'm ready. Let's do it. Let's start watching the Clone Wars." And within the first 2 episodes, they started firing from the Malevolence the ion cannon, and she goes, "Oh!" And so the
beautiful.
Everything
the Imperial credit or the Republic credit just dropped. You can find me on Letterboxd at PT McNiff, PTMCNIFF. You can also find the show there at LTR Pod. You can look for us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at The Long Take Review. You can email us, thelongtakereview@gmail.com, or you can subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology is, wherever you get your podcast, wherever you're listening right now. Hit that button and wait for some new episodes, many of which will be about Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning. Jen, where can folks find you?
You can find me, hopefully not podcasting with Greg for the 4th time this week.
Wow.
I think I now know how many. What's a good number? I'm just kidding. I love you, Greg. So you can find me on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Sopchockchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI, and you can find me on Letterboxd at Qui-Gon Jen. Release the white smoke.
Yes.
White smoke was my nickname in high school.
Too much dogma.
Thanks for listening. You can follow The Long Take Review on Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. Subscribe for free, and you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. You'll also receive written reviews of new films with Oscar buzz, as well as any new installments of prop franchises like Star Wars and Marvel.